Hello, my name is Stephen Brend, and in this short presentation I will describe the Biosphere Foundation's efforts to protect the Ramsar values of Western Port. Thank you for joining me. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the Bunurong people as the traditional owners of the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port region. We respect their elders, their traditions and customs, and honour their care and protection of the land and waters that have sustained life here for thousands of years. These will be the topics that I'll be covering, beginning with an introduction to the Ramsar Convention, as I feel Ramsar is one of those words that we use all the time as if everyone knows what it means, but perhaps they don't. I'll then describe Western Port and why it is a Ramsar wetland. I'll then describe our most recent project and conclude with a bit of a look at the future. Should we be optimistic? When people say Ramsar, or it's a Ramsar wetland, what they mean is that the wetland is listed as a wetland of international importance under the United Nations Ramsar Convention. This is the UN Convention on the Conservation and Wise Use of Wetlands. It was adopted in 1971 in the Iranian city of Ramsar, hence the name. Being listed under the Ramsar Convention signifies a wetland of international importance, not just local significance, international importance. Two interesting points of note. Firstly, Australia was one of the first countries to have a wetland listed as being of international importance under the new, as it was then, convention. So we have a long history with Ramsar. Secondly, the Ramsar Convention is often regarded as the first of the modern international intergovernment environmental agreements. You'll all be aware of COP26, the climate change conference just held in Glasgow. The origins of Conference of the Parties, or COPs, can be traced back to agreements such as the one signed in Ramsar. Finally, a question that I am often asked, is Ramsar legally binding? Technically, yes. Having a wetland listed under the convention obliges the national government to ensure effective management of the wetland. Effective management, however, remains a rather loose and ill-defined term. So this is Western Port, which, surprisingly, lies to the east of Port Phillip. We'll skip over the history of the name. It's a large, shallow bay with complex hydrology. Its western shore is the Mornington Peninsula, relatively densely populated but with some farmland. This is classed as Greater Melbourne. To the north and east you have Cardinia and Basque Coast Shires, which are definitely rural and regional, while in the middle you have French Island, 2/3 of which is National Park. There are 3 marine protected areas within Western Port, and as you can see, the designated Ramsar site encompasses all waters not directly exposed to Bass Strait. Fully 40% of Western Port may be exposed at low tide, and there is a vast clockwise circulation of water. It's an interesting place. So why is Western Port a Ramsar site? Incredibly, it meets 7 of the 9 criteria against which a wetland is considered of being of international importance. You only need to meet 1 criteria to be listed under the Ramsar Convention. Western Port meets 7. A couple of criteria refer to habitat. Are they extensive? Are they rare? Even unique? And with habitat variety comes biodiversity. Is it high? Western Port has large swathes of habitat that have been destroyed elsewhere in Victoria, but which are representative of the original Southeast Australian coastline. Western Port has salt marshes leading to Australia's southernmost mangroves, extensive mudflats, and then highly productive seagrass meadows. There are also very rare ecosystems, such as the bryozoan reefs. Another criteria refers solely to water birds. Are there over 20,000 water birds present at some point during the year? Being a crucial part of the East Asian Australasian Flyway, Western Port meets this in spades. The East Asian Australasian Flyway is the epic migratory pathway stretching from Siberia in the far north to Australia and New Zealand in the south. It's a migratory trajectory which the birds will fly year in, year out. The graphic you're watching now is following geolocators attached to the birds as they undertook the migration. On the left-hand side, you can see the passage of time, of how the weeks and the months go past, and how long these birds are up in the air. Interestingly, many of the stopover sites where the birds land are also Ramsar wetlands. The birds make a wetland of international importance. The birds, by undertaking this migration, connect countries. The birds end up in Siberia where they breed before flying back south. It's a round trip of almost 25,000 kilometers. The birds will do this every year of their adult lives. The smallest of them, the redneck stint, weighs just 30 grams. That's a box of matches. It's a Tim Tam. And yet they fly 25,000 kilometers every year. As Andrew Darby, the author of the fantastic book Flightline, said, if you're not impressed by this, quite frankly, you don't have a heartbeat. And as an important part of the Flyway, it is critically important that we play our part in making sure that Western Port remains a strong link in the chain. I hope I've convinced you about the diversity of habitats around Western Port and the bay's importance to water birds. There are additional criteria that Western Port also meets. One states that at least 1% of the total global population of a threatened species lives in the Ramsar site. The bird in the photograph is the eastern curlew, the largest and most endangered of the migratory shorebirds, which returns to Western Port every year. Western Port also protects endangered fish, such as the Australian grayling, amphibians and mammals. Finally, there are fish. 2 Ramsar criteria refer specifically to fish and fish stocks. Here again, Western Port is tick, tick, tick. The bay is a breeding ground for some species like the elephant fish and a nursery for others. The seagrass meadows are vital fish habitat. King George whiting grow here before returning to the open seas as adults to breed. It is because of the fish in the bay that the VFA, the Fishing Authority's map, looks like this. Do you get the sense they are emphasizing different things than we did in the map I showed earlier? The importance of Western Port to the recreational fishing community was the background of the Biosphere Foundation's most recent Ramsar Values project. This ran for 3 years and was funded by the Catchment Management Authority, the CMA. Its formal title was A Public Awareness Campaign for Recreational Boat Use on Western Port. When you say recreational boating on Western Port, you are essentially referring to fishing, and the project was conceived to minimise the impact of fishing on the migratory shorebirds. Was focusing on the fishing community, tackling low-hanging fruit, was this the easiest way to protect Western Port? Certainly not, but it was very important. The recreational fishing community are the single largest group of people using the bay, perhaps even more so than residents. They could impact on the Ramsar values. So what did we do? We organised field trips. We took people concerned about Western Port out onto the water to hear from them. We held workshops and community forums. During the project, we had to contend with the release of the AGL proposal for a gas importation terminal and associated pipeline. After consultation, we prepared both written and oral submissions against the development and were delighted when it was stopped. We installed signage in strategic locations. These photos show a cleaning table and a park adjacent to a very popular boat ramp and jetty. Above all, though, we talked to the people who were going out fishing. We attended fishing competitions, spoke to charter boat operators, visited bait and tackle shops, and spoke to lots and lots of people at boat ramps. I'd be lying if I said that the project went according to plan. Naturally, we learned things over time and our strategy evolved, and there were obstacles we had to overcome. No surprises here, but COVID had an impact. Essentially, there was no recreational fishing for most of 2020. That made it really hard to find out about their impact on the environment. Secondly, and surprisingly, there is actually very little overlap or interaction between people fishing and shorebirds. There is some, but not that much. Finally, it is completely wrong to talk about the fishing community as a single group of people. There's a huge variety. There are people who will only fish from jetties or sea kayakers who will be out for a few hours and delighted if they catch a couple of fish. At the other end of the spectrum, there are people who have a $70,000 boat who will go out 2 or 3 times a week. They will be out overnight if necessary, and will stay out until they have bagged out on all the target species. Consequently, the Biosphere Foundation's work split into 2 streams, one focused on the shorebirds and the other on fishing. The major output of our shorebird work will be a site action plan for Western Port, which is being developed by BirdLife Australia in partnership with the Biosphere Foundation. The reason there is little impact of fishing on the migratory shorebirds is because of the geography of Western Port. It is so shallow that boats can really only go around at high tide. At high tide, the birds are roosting above the high water mark. As the waters recede, the birds go out to forage on the mudflats, while the boats are confined to the few deep water channels. Of course, the fishing community can impact on birds, bait pumping on the mudflats being an issue of concern. People who let their dogs out of boats, wakes from boats travelling too fast, hooks, sinkers, spent line, and other litter are issues, definite issues. I wouldn't say otherwise. However, the reality is that none of them are occurring at a level that is likely to be threatening a species at a population level. The site action plan is a work in progress, and you'll hear more about it as it is developed. It will focus in on the key conservation actions that we can all take to protect these all so important and incredible birds. Similarly, our work with the fishing community is ongoing. I love this cartoon because it speaks to 2 truths. The first is that I'm certain there are people who, if the end of the world was declared, would rush straight out the door, wouldn't even say goodbye to the family, just to get in the boat to have one more launch, one more catch. But the other deeper truth is that most people, they know the rules and regulations and, under normal circumstances, will abide by them. And that's what we need to work with. What came out of our work? The first is that we have a much better understanding of what are problem issues, what's going well, what needs to be worked on. Yes, this does kick the can down the road a bit, but to future projects, but at least now they can be focused and targeted, focused on either the fishing community or on the shorebirds. Secondly, the network of people involved and talking the same language also expanded. This included the people who were concerned about AGL to the fishing clubs, fishery scientists and the fishing authorities. We began to develop a common sense of what has to happen out on the bay. Finally, I think the most important point, given the project was focused on the recreational fishing community, is that we heard what they had to say and they heard what we had to say, and a point of agreement was reached. With such variation within the fishing community, it's hard to come up with a single message, a single strategy, or even a single thing that's going wrong. Recreational fishing definitely does have an environmental impact. Driving to the launch site, all the boat engines run on petrol or diesel, plastic pollution, anchor damage to the substrate. These are all issues. However, the single biggest impact the recreational fishing community has on the Western Port environment is simply the number of fish that come out of the water. There are thousands of people catching dozens of fish. As a result of this, be happy when you've caught your dinner, not your limit, became the project's mantra, and it was applicable to everyone. You may remember from the map from the VFA, the Fishing Authority, that I showed earlier in this presentation. It emphasised the number and variety of fish in Western Port. We were very pleased in October when we saw the VFA were also talking about only taking what you need. This quote doesn't refer to bag limits, it's about taking only what you need. Honestly, we feel that if we're mirroring or echoing the commentary from the VFA, we know we're on target. Is there more work to be done? Yes. Is there another AGL around the corner? Maybe. It could be a quarry or it could be a hydrogen terminal. There are threats we are definitely going to have to face. Is recreational fishing going to grow? Most likely. Fishing routes will be upgraded, the competitions will still be held, and there will still be issues. Of course there will be, but at least we now know what to do about them. The best news is that the number of people that are concerned about the Ramsar values of Western Port has increased. And I hope I may have added a few more through this presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so Stephen sends his apologies. He was actually hoping to do that live from the UK, and that's why we chose 7 p.m. to match up with his morning. But unfortunately, something came up and he wasn't unable to do it. So that's why he pre-recorded that. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm happy to open up for any conversations or comments or questions. Feel free to unmute and speak up. I've also do have another video that we played yesterday that goes more into the history and things like that. So once anyone wants to ask any questions or comments, yeah, we can make a decision on whether you'd like to sit through that video or whether you just want to wait and we can send it out to you via email. So any comments? Very quiet out there. Okay. So what's people's thoughts about sitting through another 15 minutes of a video? Is that something you might like to do, or do you think that's it for tonight? What have you got?
Hi, it's Tony here. I really enjoyed that. It was very concisely put and informative. I'm not very well versed in what's happening in Western Port, though I know it in the background. I'm on Phillip Island, so it's kind of there all the time. So it was good to get that information, and that's what I was looking for. I'm very happy to see another video, and I've jotted down a couple of questions that maybe I can throw in later on.
Okay, no, let's do that. So I've got 2 yeses, and maybe we'll play the video, and if people feel that that's it for them tonight, just feel free to shut down and exit. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you another day. So I might hand over to Kat to see if she can get the video going. And it's a bit of an illustration, so hopefully you'll enjoy this one.
Can you see that one now?
Yeah. Yep. Wonder if the sound, I'm not getting the sound, Kat.
All right, let me try again.
Western Port is an incredibly unique area about 75 kilometers southeast of Melbourne, containing the Mornington Peninsula, 2 large islands, French Island and Phillip Island, and a large tidal bay. The region is renowned internationally for its rich diversity of flora and fauna and for its many conservation-listed species. 2/3 of Victorian bird species are found within the bay, including 43 migratory bird species which are protected under international treaties. Its high diversity stems from its very unusual combination of unique habitat types, including mangroves, salt marshes, seagrass meadows, mudflats, and rocky coasts, all existing in close proximity to one another and linked together by natural tidal flows that circulate nutrients throughout the ecosystem. This diversity in habitats and in species gains the site international recognition as a significant wetland under the 1971 United Nations Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. The Ramsar Convention governs the conservation and the wise use of wetlands of international importance. It requires at least one of 9 criteria for significance be met for a wetland to be recognized. Western Port meets 7 of these. For example, Western Port is home to 18 threatened, endangered, or critically endangered species, including the critically endangered orange-bellied parrot, one of Australia's most endangered birds. One of only 3 migratory parrot species in the world, these birds rely on the salt marsh vegetation as overwintering habitat. Other threatened species calling Western Port home include the threatened Australian grayling, the endangered southern brown bandicoot, and the endangered fringe spider orchid. Western Port also supports dozens of different plants and animal species at critical stages of their life cycles, such as during migration, breeding, and early life, another Ramsar criteria. For example, the tidal bay serves as a winter home for migrating endangered southern right whales, while the salt marshes, mudflats, and rocky shores provide migratory retreats for birds traveling from regions as distant as Siberia, like the tiny red-necked stint. Western Port's unassuming mudflats are considered to be one of the 3 most important sites for migratory birds in Victoria. The rocky coasts support the largest Australian fur seal breeding colony in Australia, major rookeries of the little penguin, and the only Western Victorian breeding site for lifelong bonded pairs of white-bellied sea eagles. Sheltered tide pools and quiet lush meadows of seagrass act as safe nursery sites for young fish and for small marine creatures. Western Port is not just important to finned and feathered species, it has a long history of importance to humans. For at least 18,000 years before Europeans ever laid eyes on the bay, Western Port was populated by the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, in particular the Mayon Bullock clan, the Yaluk Bullock clan, and the Burinyong Bullock clan. The Bunurong peoples have deep spiritual connections with the land and sea, and the area hosts many significant meeting spots, women's and men's spots, and initiation sites. Care for the environment by the Bunurong peoples ensured the persistence of key food species such as the blackfish, which were the likely namesake of the Kuwirup swamp. Western Port's distinct biodiversity is a homage to the thousands of years of nurturing thought put into the cultivation of the region. Since European occupation, human populations have grown dramatically, and the Western Port ecosystem has been put under considerable pressure as a result of increasing development. The fertile soils surrounding the bay supported the growth of a profitable agricultural industry, and today the region is a major food bowl for the greater Melbourne area, providing vegetables, beef, lamb, chicken, dairy, and fruit. The bay also attracted heavy industry, with the Port of Hastings serving as an important link to trade routes. Some of these industries remain today, such as steel mills and a gas fractionation plant, and some do not, such as oil refineries. Urban areas grew rapidly through the 20th century, and urban growth of the Western Port region was the fastest of anywhere in Victoria in the late 90s. It accounted for 43% of residential growth across Melbourne. Along with this increasing urban, agricultural, and industrial development has come widespread vegetation clearing and habitat destruction. This has not just represented an environmental loss, but also a cultural loss, with the loss of sites precious to the Bunurong peoples, such as the now drained Kuwi-Rup Swamp. Today, Western Port's unique value is increasingly widely recognized, but many challenges still face the long-term survival of its fragile habitats. Commercial fishing was phased out in 2009, but with increasing populations and tourist activity, overfishing still poses a threat to food chains, and the ever-growing human populations continue to encroach on natural habitats. Moreover, rising sea levels and temperatures, ocean acidification, and altered weather patterns as a result of changing climates all threaten the delicate balance of habitats within the Western Port ecosystem. There are many reasons that the loss of Western Port's unique habitats would be a blow to humans and nature alike. As much as Western Port is important in an environmental sense, its natural habitats still support our human societies, as they have for thousands of years. Agricultural industries continue to rely on healthy soils and water cycles, and visitors continue to be delighted by its natural wonders, like the Phillip Island Penguin Parade and the iconic beaches frequented by visitors in the summer. Protecting Western Port's ecosystems is therefore just as important to us as it is to the fishes, seals, and birds. So how do we go about balancing the protection of Western Port's natural habitats with the livelihoods of the people that call this place home? In 2003, the local communities in Western Port embarked on a journey to build a stronger partnership between man and nature through the creation of the internationally recognized Western Port Biosphere. The biosphere plays an important role in planning for a sustainable environment while protecting the livelihoods and economy that depend on Western Port's industry. So what exactly is a biosphere? Biospheres are part of UNESCO's Man and the Biosphere program, and the Western Port Biosphere is one of 4 UNESCO biospheres in Australia. The Biosphere program aims to conserve biodiversity while at the same time supporting people to live and work as sustainably as possible within their environment. UNESCO, the science branch of the United Nations, established the Biosphere program in the 1960s as a way to deal with human environmental interactions. It was born from UNESCO's collaborations with international non-governmental organizations after recognizing the need for a program that could focus on regions where traditional human exclusion-style conservation was not feasible. The program would create a global community of sites called biospheres, which would serve as test places for creating innovative local solutions to global problems of balancing human and environmental needs. These test places are very different from a national park or a conservation reserve, where human activities are highly restricted. In fact, these biospheres have entire communities of humans living inside of them. There are currently 714 UNESCO biospheres across 129 countries, with over 250 million people living inside their boundaries. Thus, the primary function of a biosphere cannot stop at just the conservation of species. It must also foster sustainable economic and human development, and must provide scientific and technical support to promote education, training, and research. This is what makes the biosphere model so unique. It recognizes that within our homes there can be a patchwork of human and environmental priorities which can still find balance. The Mornington Peninsula and Western Port Biosphere Foundation was designated by UNESCO in 2002 and held its first meeting in 2003. Trading as the Western Port Biosphere, its boundary takes in all of Mornington Peninsula Shire, plus parts of 4 other local government areas, including the shires of Bass Coast and Cardinia Shire, and the cities of Casey and Frankston. Today, the Foundation is governed by an independent skills-based board with positions reserved for a representative of Western Port's traditional owners and a nominee representing the 5 councils. The board is supported by several committees and a small team of part-time staff. Under an MOU, the 5 local councils provide funding that contributes to the Foundation's operational costs. Project-specific and core funding is also sought and gratefully received from other sources, including state and federal governments, philanthropic groups, and sponsors. The biosphere is subject to periodic reviews with UNESCO to demonstrate continuing benefits to both the environment and to a sustainable economy through projects that build win-wins between humans and nature. To undertake these projects, the biosphere assembles diverse teams of partners, representing environmental, social, and economic interests, who together build a shared vision for a healthy and thriving home. Some of the biosphere's partners include the Port Phillip Western Port Catchment Management Authority, the Willam Moraine Aboriginal Association, Parks Victoria, Melbourne Water, local schools, and local businesses such as farms and campgrounds. The biosphere's goal is to create win-wins between environmental, social, and economic goals, and it undertakes a range of projects that can deliver simultaneous improvements for natural spaces as well as local business and community. 3 examples of biosphere projects building such win-wins are the Water Stewardship Program, the Biodiversity in Schools Program, and the Protecting Ramsar Values Program. The Water Stewardship Program is all about working with individual water users to create a united program to address water quality issues present within the broader environment. The program fosters collaboration between many stakeholders, such as the community, water agencies, and industries. There are a vast range of industries that have adopted the program, including chicken processors, horticultural farms, plant nurseries, livestock producers, schools, campsites, golf courses, steel makers, and more. The program facilitates responsible water management practices, such as increasing reuse of water on site, eliminating the release of excess nutrients into waterways, revegetating riparian areas, and reducing erosion damage. The benefits of these actions are not just restricted to the environment. Healthier catchments contribute to improved water quality and future water supplies for the community, and improvements in water use efficiency provides financial benefits to businesses by mitigating the impact of volatile water prices and reducing damage to soils caused by erosion. One of our greatest tools for encouraging care and conservation of our habitats is education. Over the last 3 years, the Biosphere Reserve Foundation has been bringing to light the incredible Western Port Bay to schools in the region through a fun and interactive program that teaches students about the ecology and biodiversity all around them. Students learn about what it means to live in a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, the Ramsar Convention, and the importance of Western Port Bay for migratory shorebirds. The program also facilitates species monitoring projects on school grounds through camera tracking, catching everything from foxes to brown bandicoots on film. Western Port is listed under the United Nations Ramsar Convention as a wetland of international importance. As previously mentioned, this means that Western Port is one of 12 Victorian wetlands recognized as biodiversity hotspots. The Ramsar Values Project helps educate the community about the significance of Western Port. Notably, that Western Port supports an abundant and diverse range of aquatic species and water birds that may be endangered, threatened, or experiencing a critical life stage. Balancing the Ramsar values with the needs of the community is a key challenge. Recreational fishers are the single largest users of the bay. The Victorian Fisheries Authority sets catch limits based on scientific advice, but there has generally been limited engagement with the fishing community to understand their point of view. Thus, the Protecting Ramsar Values Project aims to bridge that gap by working with the local community to provide education and incentives that promote best practices, like observing catch limits, avoiding bait pumping, going slow near roosting and feeding birds, taking care not to damage reefs when anchoring, and checking, cleaning, and drying your boat to prevent the spread of marine pests. When done mindfully, recreational fishing doesn't need to come at a cost to the environment, maintaining both a healthy environment and a happy community. Western Port Biosphere is just as passionate about our community as it is our environment. We would love to hear your stories, your passions, and your ideas. There are plenty of ways to engage with our biosphere. We are always looking for volunteers to help with our projects. You can help us build our photo libraries to share the beauty of our region, or you can log records of Western Port's diverse species through our iNaturalist project. We are always looking for businesses and landholders to join the Water Stewardship Program for support in making water-related improvements to your property, and we are always looking for schools to join our biodiversity program to enrich curriculums with local knowledge and care. We have a Facebook page and a website, and you can contact us at info@biosphere.org.au. We can't wait to work together with you for the benefit of our diverse communities and our beautiful, unique environment.
Okay, so that was a presentation that we put together that hopefully can spell out exactly what the Biosphere Foundation is all about. And yeah, so I didn't introduce Kat. So Kat's one of our interns that's been working with us for the last 6 months. So as the video said, we're always looking for new people to be involved. So watch this space. So we'll just open it up to the floor. If anyone's got any questions or comments, feel free to unmute and just go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes, Sue.
Yes, thank you. The sand mining around Grantville along the stretch to Lang Lang are using chemicals to wash sand, which I believe eventually ends up in the bay. Are you aware of this and are you concerned about it?
Not specifically aware of the impacts, but we're certainly aware of the development there and the operations. So I haven't got anything at hand in regards to any immediate concerns, but certainly any insights or known issues, it's certainly something the Biosphere is definitely interested in knowing more about.
Okay. The Save Western Port Woodlands had a connection with a gentleman who understood the chemicals that we used. I don't have the details to hand. Would you be interested in receiving those details?
Yeah, for sure. We're always looking for things like that to try and help support any of those types of issues, and wherever we can help. Certainly our water stewardship program is very big on water quality and definitely working with industries to try and effectively clean up their acts. So yeah, feel free to start the conversation through our info at biosphere.org.au, and then I can certainly channel that through the right people.
Okay, thank you. I will. I'll get on to Catherine from the group and get something emailed.
Yeah, look, I know with the short time I've been with the Biosphere, certainly the that sort of group has been quite active, and there's been communication channels. So I'm very keen to see how we can help support that sort of initiative.
Okay, thank you.
It's Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, good. I just add to Sue's comment there. I think the chemicals of concern are the flocculants and coagulants that are used to settle the fine dispersive materials that washed in the sand. I think the principal concern was its sort of reaction with the groundwater systems that migrate to the bay, and the potential for some of those chemicals to concentrate and form carcinogenic type compounds. It's a difficult chemistry area, but the real concern is the expansion of the sand mining, and that they will be going more to these sort of processes as they get the more difficult sands they have to exploit. And this is a real test case for living with issues, because it's the major sand production area now, really, for Central Victoria's infrastructure build, along with the rock from over at Wyndham Way. It certainly needs closer looking at all of that.
And am I right in saying that's near the Holden Proving Ground?
one in particular, there's an amendment one to one called Dandy Premix just north of Grantville.
Yeah.
Who have consistently been just exploiting sand without washing it. Now they're going deeper, and they'll be digging into the groundwater system and using a pit for the washing residues, which will mix with the groundwater systems. You know, it's a difficult area because you can always go and find a hydrogeologist who will tell you that it's isolated, but there's never certainty on that.
No, and I was also going to make comment that would be Western Port water, would it? That area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that's Western Port water certainly for groundwater, and one of the interesting things that may not be required now, but I understand there is a groundwater well near the Grantville Hall, which was used as a backup for the main reservoir up in the hills prior to the desal plant. Now, whether it's still being used, we don't know, but that's I only just heard about that recently. I've actually got to admit that I'm actually a public member on the Environmental Review Committee for the sand miners, and trying to get past the small sort of local issues. If someone's living next door to a sand mine, try and look at the bigger issues as this resource gets further developed, and how do you get the right balance with protection of the resources, not only the bushland, but also the groundwater systems and ultimately the bay.
and I suspect you being a member of that group or that committee, am I right in saying that the company comes back saying they're probably within what EPA requirements are? Is that the feeling you're getting?
Yes, so it's been one of my tasks the last few years is actually to get them to report properly.
Yeah.
Against their licenses, which are principally the mining license and their planning permits. I've never seen an EPA person at those meetings.
Yeah.
So some would have groundwater extraction licenses, which would be, I think, Southern Rural Water or probably Southern Rural Water. Not sure exactly there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been my effort the last few years, try to get them to actually report effectively to the public, and we've now got a challenge to get the public engaged with it. Anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, look, it is certainly something we've touched on in the foundation, is around that. You know, you would have seen in that video or that illustration video, you know, that the sort of the brief of the UNESCO convention is about how we do live together and how do we make sure we protect the environment. And this is a great example of where, you know, maybe if we can just get that company to work within the requirements, that's step one. And then two, try and improve those requirements as well. But it sounds like there might be a bit of a couple of steps to get to step one first, just to be transparent on what some of the test results actually are.
That's true. There were 6 members on that committee, and it's diminished because they're getting older and tired, and they've probably dealt with the little small issues where they live next door, but it's now there are bigger picture issues coming to the fore. Yeah. So anyway,
I think that's certainly worth touching base. I think the foundation can help try and access information. We probably, you know, don't want to necessarily take a position until we understand what they are first. But, you know, hearing what you're saying, it sounds like there's a gap there of transparency, and maybe the foundation could help in just interconnecting that somehow.
Yes, that's probably true. I think they're coming up to a point where they're going to be sort of reformatting that group with the new terms of reference, and they actually do have the Save Our Western Port Woodlands group attending a meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I welcome that. And I just hope that the regulator requires the operators who run this review committee, fund it, and report to it, that they will run a process to try and bring in better public representation, because it's not just the people who live next door anymore that should be interested in this. Yeah.
All right. Well, touch base through that that info at biosphere.org.au. Hopefully, we'll catch up at some stage and chat further about it.
Yes, good on you. I have one other comment too, just in regard the management plans. One of the things that I'm an engineer, originally mining, turned environmental for 25 years, managing land, water and air at your lawn. And the first thing I learned and kept coming back to was if you don't monitor, you can't manage.
Yeah.
And there's a paucity of monitoring of water quality, the runoffs into the bay, Western Port Bay in particular.
Yeah.
Yes, there's other means of monitoring habitat impacts and everything, but you know, one of the key ones that's got to be measured is water.
Yeah, well, I said earlier on Thursday at 1 o'clock, we've got our water stewardship presentation. So, you know, maybe it's relevant to maybe apply something like that to a business like you suggest.
Yeah, I mean, yes, they'll have a range of license. I've just forgotten what they've got there. And they'll have planning permits. Council actually stepped out of the forum, which is a bit of a disappointment. They were involved with planning permits for these operators, which means, you know, roads and traffic and everything else around the place. And there are certainly issues there with the trucks. But for whatever reason, council has stepped out. So they've got the mining regulator really running it as the main, you know, reporting, the parties they've got to report to, really.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
No worries.
I've got a couple of questions, kind of tie in a little bit with what Kevin said. Thanks for all that, Kevin.
Yeah, good.
One is sort of like, I suppose, a management political thing, and that is to what extent or how is the work of the Biosphere Foundation regarded by government? In other words, how much influence can you exert, or how much are your suggestions and reports listened to? And the other thing that ties in a little bit with what Kevin was saying is that it seems to me that to some extent Western Port is almost like a contained system, like there's not huge tides washing in and out of it. They're flushing it, if you like. And so does that make it more vulnerable to things like what washes into the bay from things like sand washing?
Well, with regards to your first question, I can certainly vouch for our local government support. So certainly the foundation has memorandum of understandings with 5 of the councils that meet the Western Port Bay. So we have regular conversations around a whole range of things, and certainly have the ability to take issues and things through that local level. And we certainly do have partnerships or funding throughout the state and federal government levels, and I guess we've been quite healthy over the last few years in some good funding. So, you know, as far as you know, contributing to different sort of I guess open to public comments on certain strategies and things like that, we certainly try to be active there. Whether our our say has any more bearing than anyone else. It's hard to tell. But we are a key stakeholder in a lot of those types of marine issues that come through us. So we try to put as much effort into that as possible. And I guess, you know, looking at the actual ecology and function of Western Port, I think you're exactly right. There's no, I mean, I was out there today down at Grantville just looking at some of the seagrass and mangroves, or lack of, and just seeing within 20 years how much erosion has occurred already in 20 years, and how that might look like in another 20 years, and certainly there's that sort of thinking that it's not just what's happening in the bay, it's stuff that's happening outside of the bay as well. So anything coming through the catchment, and as you've just suggested, any type of industry that's operating nearby has an influence as well. Yeah, so I can only agree with your comments that it is very, very important to make sure we do understand what those threats are, and we can't do anything about it until we really do understand what they are, and then hopefully we can start, you know, coming up with some management strategy to try and address some of those issues.
Yeah, that must have been was a significant part of the argument against the AGL site at the north of the bay, I think, wasn't it? The impact on the biodiversity and grasslands and things like that. Seagrasses, I mean. Yeah,
and my understanding too, it was a good cross section of the community too that were sort of concerned. So it wasn't just single stakeholders; it was quite across the board. So, you know, that's why that outcome came.
Thank you.
No worries.
Glenn, if Kevin could send the notice of that meeting in a couple of weeks through to the Biosphere, I'd be certainly keen to try and make it down there if I could. So send it through and we'll post it on the website, hopefully. The Biosphere does have a policy, a general policy on the sand mining that's on our website if anybody's interested. We've got the issue that the state government designated the area from Lang Lang to Grantville as an area of state significance for sand extraction, and we're going to be bumping our heads up against that all the time. But it's really important that these industries or companies are made to have good science backing up anything they do. So that's the way we defeated the importation of the gas. Their science was lacking. So that's really important, that if any proposal they have has to be backed up by good science, and that's the way hopefully we can defeat this. If the science is not good or not complete, that'll be our best way to fight against this sand mining, and it's certainly going to be a major issue along the eastern side of Western Port. I don't think people realise just how much impact it will have on that area, because most of the sand happens to be under the areas that haven't been cleared as well. So it's going to have a real impact on that area.
Thanks, David. So, anyone else want to add to the conversation while we're at it?
I'll just add that in regards to that meeting, it's actually not a public meeting as such, but I can certainly provide the contact for the chair of the independent chair of that Environmental Review Committee for Biosphere to contact. And they do run quarterly meetings, so if it's not the one coming up, it could be another one early next year. I think that's a healthy thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's an hour, so that's a lot of each other's time. So thanks for joining us. And yeah, if you've got time on Thursday, 11 o'clock, we've got a session on biodiversity in schools. And then 1 o'clock, we've got Lance talking about our water stewardship program. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks, everyone.